on pulses and having an update of the status of the sector's performance in various countries and issues involved in pulses trade has definitely added to my knowledge, which will help me to suggest alternatives for facilitating policy decisions back in my seat. All of us here really bear the responsibility of taking forward the outcome of these discussions and deliberations. Based on the themes resonated in these deliberations, some issues which probably we would like to take up, and maybe all of you would like to also take up, is the data mismatch. I think the IPGA could also do this. We would also like to do it at the government level. Steps to enhance productivity, incentivize the farmers to grow pulses, introduce improved technology, because this morning only we heard that this processing technology, if it's really good, then I think it will make a difference to the yield by about 5%. And in the morning sessions, we heard about the recovery also, which recovery process could be improved. Issues relating to relaxation on existing quarantine provisions, though it doesn't fall within the domain of the Department of Consumer Affairs, we would like to take it up with the concerned department, because I think there were some expressions regarding China and some South African countries, which they wanted some further relaxations. Clearly, a study to assess the demand profile and map the consumption pattern across different strata and usages looks very essential. Maybe what Mr. Praveen Dongre has done in terms of a panel discussion on what the prices would be, we need to do, I think, to look at what the consumption is even across the states in India, how is the demand pattern changing, and what really we need to take into account, because we do not have a national profile on this. So maybe this kind of an discussion we could also have. Sharing of the proceedings and issues highlighted in these deliberations will definitely enable the government to take a holistic view while framing policies in the future for this sector. Inter-pulses price parity, the price and the non-price factors which really contribute to an increase in production or a fall in production. Commodity research, essentially, I think commodity intelligence research, so that we glean into what is really pulses trade. These are all some aspects which come to my mind straight away. On behalf of the delegates and on my own behalf, I would like to thank the organizing team of this event for the extraordinary efficiency and hospitality that they have displayed in attending to all the delegates. I'm sure all of us will cherish and carry back with us very happy memories of this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your absolutely erudite address. You've been extremely patient with us with this conference last 3 days. I think you probably didn't miss even a single session. You've been around since the time of the inaugural and talking to people, discussing, trying to understand issues. That shows the keen interest that the Government of India takes as far as pulses sector is concerned in India. And the Government of India is also keen to engage with just not the stakeholders in India, but stakeholders in the pulses sector across the world. I just want, on behalf of the managing committee, on behalf of the association, I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your continued support. And I'll now leave it to President Praveen Dongre. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrasekhar. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to make it very special and from the heart for Mrs. Gangamurthy for spending her time here with us. And along with the beautiful words that Mr. Chandrasekhar has said, we'd like to present a memento on behalf of this occasion, the Global Pulses Conclave 2012, from India Pulses and Grains Association, the President and Vice President, gratefully handing over a memento to Mrs. Gangamurthy. Ladies and gentlemen, I require you all to please give her a big round of applause. And if you're not too old to stand, please give her a standing ovation for being with us here right through 3 days. We thank you deeply, ma'am, for your presence here and bringing your extremely knowledgeable and gracious presence to this forum. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a few more important things to do. Just to remind you once again, if you're not yet checked out, please ensure that you check out from the room so that you don't incur a special charge. In a short while, I'll also let you know about the programs. We've got 2 more sessions to go on. The session, panel discussion on lentils, green and red lentils, and before that, a presentation by Mr. T. Gnanshekaran on Comtrends. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now, it's time for lunch. Lunch is being served out in the foyer area. We'll see you back in half an hour. To please grace the dais. Jeff on Pevenage. Jeff, apologies. Mr. A.C. Mahmood. Sanjay Jain. Mr. Ranjit Soni. William Alexander. Okay. And I'll hand it over to Mr. Murad El Khatib.
Testing, check. Good afternoon, everyone. The final session of the Global Pulses Conclave. Just before we start, I think on behalf of a lot of the guests of this meeting, I think it's really in order for us to thank Mr. Praveen Dongra and the group here for organizing this fantastic event and networking event for everyone. So before we start, a round of applause for Praveen and his team. I think they really deserve it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Murad El Khatib. I'm President and CEO of Alliance Grain Traders. We're head officed in Canada, and many of you in India will know us operating as Sascan Pulse, and so we're involved in the pulses sector. I have with me a panelist group which is very experienced and very representative of our industry. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of panelists who have been unable to join us, one flight that was canceled and one panelist who wasn't able to join us. So we'll do our best to address the issue of lentils, red and green. And I think just as a starting point, you know, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to look at supply position within the various jurisdictions. So we're going to count on Jeff and Will and myself to, you know, give you a perspective of Canada, USA, Australia, and of course the three of us as processors, exporters, and traders will do our best because we're all involved really in more than one origin of production. So we're going to break down the regional focus and make this more of a global lentil focus. So we'll start with supply positions, and I think what I'll do is I'll ask Will to start with Australia, and then we can move from Australia to the US, and I'll give you a Canadian perspective. And we're going to rely on Mahmood to provide for us a bit of perspective, you know, not only on Sri Lanka, because I think that really what we're looking for is a perspective of an end-use user of lentils coming from the different origins. I think it's important to look at some of the issues facing our industry going forward. So Will, I'll turn to you.
Thanks, Murad. I'll just run through briefly what I think the production in Australia's been and going to be this year and possibly next year. In recent times with Australian lentils, we've seen very high prices due to a global shortage. So in 3 years ago, we started seeing lentil prices up over $1,000 to the grower. So obviously the growers have then started turning around and planting more lentils, and we've seen that globally in Australia and Canada. So our crop in the last couple of years has increased compared to years before that. So in 2010 and 11, we had a crop size of about 300,000 tonnes. And in a normal year, that year we had 250,000 tonnes of exports. So there was a carry-out of somewhere between 50 to 75,000 tonnes of 2010, 2011 crop. So going into 2011, 2012 crop, which was a similar size, slightly smaller, something like 275,000 tonnes. We planted, according to Pulse Australia, about 175,000 hectares. So this year, there's still plenty of stocks in Australia, and if exports continue on the same pace they have done for last year and so far this year, we'd expect a slightly smaller carry-out at the end of this season going into 2012's crop, of somewhere between 25 and 50,000 tons. So right now, there's plenty of lentils still kicking around in Australia that we have to export in the next few months. As far as those exports go out of Australia, last year, again, like I said, there was 250,000 tons exported. The main buyer of that was Sri Lanka, which actually took 90,000 tons, and then Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates, about 30,000 tons each, were the main buyers of our red lentils out of Australia. One thing to note there is the fact that India isn't really a big buyer of our red lentils, and maybe this year that's something we need to consider with what's happening over there. So that's Australia, Murad.
Well, just before we move out of Australia, just give a perspective of, the current stock levels. You talked about, ample stocks being available. Carryover from last year, there was some quality issues in Australia versus the new crop. What is your view on current stocks? Is there, the old crop stock still laying around, or has it been burned through?
Oh, there's always going to be some old crop stocks kicking around, but a lot of it now will be new crop, and the quality is much better. So it's a big improvement on the year before. So again, Australia's weather, it's very volatile, so who knows? I mean, new crop, again, there could be rain, there could be anything, there could be hot weather. There's all sorts of things that can impact the Australian crop and cause some damage.
Okay, and give us a perspective on 2012 plantings and view of where production is going.
Well, because of the way the price has been to the farmer in Australia recently, the new crop plantings will be down. Not drastically, probably maybe 10%, something like that. Again, it's early to say. If there's a rally in the lentil market now, again, they will plant more. So, but currently, we would say the crop will be maybe 10% down on last year, which would put it somewhere between 250 to 275,000 tons next year, again, which is adequate to cover all the exports that we've had so far.
Good, thank you, Jeff. We'll switch gears and take a look at the northern tier states, lentils in the U.S. We'll ask you to give us a similar type of overview.
Sure. In the United States, we grow primarily green lentils. About 70% of our crop is typically richly green lentils. So we started this year, last year, 2010 crop, we raised a little over 400,000 tons. We started this year with relatively large carryout stocks as we had quality problems in our 2010 crop, so there was a lot of that product that didn't move. We started out with 120,000 tons, which typically in the U.S. we've been basically at 15 to 20,000 ton ending stocks, which is virtually sold out. So we started out strong. We had miserable seeding conditions through the spring. Only had a crop this year of about 225,000 tons. So with our inventory that was up, we came in here in about December 1st with about just shy of 300,000 tons, which is virtually unchanged from the prior year. In the U.S. this year, we've struggled somewhat to get on exports. As of the end of the first quarter, we'd only done about 28,000 metric tons in exports versus 60,000 tons the previous year. And some of that has to do with the Colombian Free Trade Agreement, which a lot of our richlies do end up going into Colombia, and the U.S. is at about an 18% disadvantage to Canada right now because the U.S. hasn't managed to get a free trade agreement passed with Colombia yet. And we've also, a lot of our richlies need to come to India, and the market just has not been there for our richlies to disappear into India. So we've struggled. We have strong stocks at this point in time.
Acreage, what do you think is happening in the interaction with other crops, Jeff?
Well, last year we lost a lot of acreage, and the primary reason for losing it last year was the weather. We just could never get it seeded. If you looked at it today based upon prices, I've taken a look at it at $675 a ton India. That's the number 11 crop that a farmer in North Dakota can seed. Malt barley's better, corn's better, soybean's better, flax is better, canola's better, and in North Dakota even wheat is better, which is, wheat economics aren't that great this year, but in North Dakota it's better. When you move into Montana where we're a little bit drier, we don't have the choices for soybeans and that, lentils can still stand in about the 4th or 5th best crop. Based upon the acres that we lost last year in North Dakota just due to weather, the U.S. should rebound acres, probably somewhat back up to about the 550,000 acre level again this year. Montana, I would imagine, will probably be about sideways. In the United States, we're really just, some of our producers are starting to fall in love with it more as a rotation, and particularly in Montana. So I believe will be somewhere around the 550 to 600,000 level for acres and lentils this year.
Perfect. I guess I'll move on to Canada, give you a bit of a perspective. If we look at the current production levels in Canada, 2011 crop was around 2.6 million acres, and harvested stocks were reported around 1.55 million tons. If we look at exports reported to end of December, about 500,000 tons has been exported. So we're left with total stock of around probably somewhere around 1 million tons, including red and green. The breakdown in terms of current crop stocks would be, in my estimation, probably around 500,000 ton of red and about an equal amount of green lentils. Remember, in Canada, with the green lentils, we do have Eston type small green, a very limited medium green production, and very significant large green production. So, when we look at a green lentil, carry of 500,000 tons, it is in multiple different crops. I think one of the things that a lot of importers are asking in India is, what has happened to the carryover of 2010 stock? As you all know, when we have a crop issue in the world in terms of production, usually we're dealing with frost or drought in Canada. And so the 2010 crop would have presented for us probably one of the most substantially disastrous outcomes, where acreage had reached a record of 3.5 million acres of production. And at a time where yields looked very strong, we had 21 days of rain, and we received an annual rainfall in 21 days at harvest. So we received moisture equivalent to the total annual average rainfall. What that did was degrade the quality quite substantially, and many of the importers in the world have faced issues around that crop. The good news is that stock is